And now for part 6 in my series of video game movie reviews comes one of the more obscure adaptations of a game that was primarily on... Is that Captain Panaka? Wing Commander follows Freddie Prinze Jr. and Matthew Lillard as two new pilot recruits in the Wing Commander universe. In this universe, we are apparently at war with an alien race called the Kilrathi. Though it's never really explained as to why we're at war with the Kilrathi, but I guess it's just because they look different from us, and hey, that's worked out for us in the past. The movie starts out with the Kilrathi obtaining one of our top secret nav computers. With said nav computer, they will be able to locate our homeworld, Earth. This is a bad thing because they want to, kill us all. And I guess up until this point they didn't know where the hell we came from. The majority of the film sees our two heroes and their new comrades jumping around space trying to locate and then stop the Kilrathi fleet from reaching Earth's space. There's also a subplot about the first human space travelers called the Pilgrims and a war between the Pilgrims and the rest of human civilization that happened a long time ago that's not really ever fleshed out and sounds a lot cooler than the rest of the plot of this movie. But we don't really ever get to see any of that, we just hear about it a lot. When it comes to the game that this movie is based on, I didn't have a tremendous amount of exposure to it. I remember playing one of them a little bit and then being very story driven, but beyond that, that's about all I can remember. So I come into this movie pretty blank slate and prepared to judge it on its own merits as a standalone movie. That being said, let's jump right in. This is one of the more obscure and forgotten video game movies made. And while the series was popular among PC players, it wasn't necessarily among the popularity of, say, Super Mario Bros. Or Mortal Kombat, or even Double Dragon. So I remember even thinking when it came out, who was asking for this? Why did this get made? Well, asking for it or not, we got it. Overall, the movie really reminds me of a much less engaging Battlestar Galactica. The newer one, not the one from the 70s and 80s. And yeah, I know Battlestar Galactica came out after this movie, but it doesn't change the fact that that's what this movie reminds me of. Minus all the engaging, entertaining parts of the show. The story, like a lot of this movie, is just okay. It's pretty straightforward. There's nothing that doesn't happen that we don't see coming from a mile away. There's no surprises really whatsoever, and it's not too terribly exciting either. Which when you have scenes of spaceships dogfighting, you would think it'd be a little bit more exciting. Honestly, the first half of the movie has absolutely no action whatsoever. Which if the character and story building were interesting, I'd be okay with that. But no, you're just kind of bored for the first half. That's not to say you're not bored for the second half too, but you're really bored for the first half, and the second half you're just, To its credit, the movie does try to have a fair amount of character building. In fact, a great deal of the movie is devoted to character building. You get a lot of backstory to the characters and the world, especially in the first half of the movie. And while I've criticized movies in the past for not having enough backstory and enough character building moments in them, when that's all you have and it's all through exposition dumps, it tends to get a little boring. And it doesn't help that even though there is character building here, it all falls pretty flat. You just don't care. Part of the reason may be because it's all people telling you things that have happened or telling you things about someone instead of showing you any of it. Relationships between characters, romantic and otherwise, are forged within minutes, but they're treated as if they've known each other for years. In turn, when certain events happen, you're supposed to feel something for certain characters, and you just don't due to the poor character building. It all just seems very rushed. And I'm sure as story heavy as the source material is, and with as many entries as it has, there's plenty of story there to be had. In fact, you get that feeling throughout the whole movie that there's lots of story in this world to be had, and they try and cram in too much but not explain enough of it. They should have either cut out some of it and focused more on what they had, or maybe expanded this into something else like a TV show where they had time to explore this whole entire world. I feel like the interesting pieces are there, we just never really get a chance to explore them. There's even a part in the movie where they decide to try and be Das Boot for a while, which if you haven't seen that, check it out. It's an awesome movie. I don't know if they meant for this to be kind of an homage to that movie, but really it's so beat for beat that movie, it comes off as just pretty much being a ripoff. It's even got the main actor from Das Boot. Regardless, check out Das Boot. It's a good movie. And then there's the acting, and that certainly doesn't help things. Honestly, the acting overall is okay. It's not awful, and it's not great. It's just kind of there. With the exception of Matthew Lillard. He's being very Matthew Lillard, which his brand of acting and excitement works in some properties. But in this one, it just seems very off and stands out a lot. And while the character is just being himself, while over the top, it's okay, I guess. When he goes to try and show some type of deeper emotion, it gets really bad. It ain't pretty. Furthermore, the Kilrathi, the main antagonists of the movie, while themselves they're not shown very often, and perhaps that's to give them a mystique, when they are shown, they really just don't look that great. Not to mention, they're pretty one-dimensional. They're not even really one-dimensional. They're pretty no-dimensional. The few times they're shown, they pretty much spout out a little bit of dialogue about destroying everything and killing all of us, and that's about it. We're never given a reason as to why, or what they hate so much about us, or why we're even at war, or what's going on at all. I guess we're just supposed to hate them because plot convenience. The special effects in this movie are very hit or miss. The miniature work that they use is actually pretty good, but some of the CG overlays they'll put over that miniature work really take away from the whole thing and just kind of look like ass. There's a scene in the beginning where you have this like spaceship docking yard, and you can tell it's all done with miniatures and they actually look pretty good. But when the inevitable explosions start to happen, they're all CG and they just look like butt and really take away from the whole thing. Most of the CG in this movie does revolve around spaceships flying around in space shooting at each other. And it seems like sometimes they used miniatures that looked pretty good, and then other times they would use CG versions of the ships. And I couldn't figure this out, because as stated before, the miniatures looked really good, but the CG just really stood out like a sore thumb. Overall, the effects are pretty 50-50 too. One minute you look at them and say, hey, that looks pretty damn good. The next minute you're like, what the hell were they thinking? Unfortunately, Wing Commander is just pretty boring and poorly executed overall. There's poor character and world building. It's not really exciting at all. The special effects are all over the place. And as I said, the biggest offense of all, it's just boring. Now, it's not offensive like, say, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, but it is just boring and not really worth your time and definitely not worth your money. While it's not an absolute dumpster fire, I'd say this one would be best reserved for USA Up All Night. Have it on in the background while you're vacuuming the house or something. And if you miss it all together, don't worry, you're not missing much. So there it is, guys, my review of Wing Commander. If you enjoyed and want more like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Lieutenant J.G. Christopher Blair, reporting for duty, sir.
I fell asleep like 3 times while watching this movie. And it was so boring that while watching it, whenever I saw this guy, all I could think about was Captain Panaka! I don't know why.